we heard initially from Verena I suppose a social science gerontological perspective. Mary, as a professor of law, has given us a helpful overview of legislation in America as contrasted with the Benelux countries. Peter Markesteyn was for almost 20 years the chief medical officer of the province of Manitoba. So he's part of his concern is medical, but part is legal, forensic. And I'm not sure whether Peter would accept this as a fair way of describing at least part of his role, but when a physician and a patient figure out that the patient, let's say, has ALS and wants to die, is ready to die now, and when they figure out a way to hasten that death and minimize the suffering, the job of the forensic pathologist is to come along and blow the whistle on them and make sure that they get into, at least the doctor gets into legal trouble. Now, I mention this because of Peter some years ago was involved in a very dramatic case in which he, as chief medical officer, called a coroner's inquest, and the doctor who was in effect put on trial, though didn't actually go to court, was his boss at the medical school. Drama, high drama. Peter, what do you say? Are you the heavy of the story? Wearing the black hat or the white hat?
That's right. Well, one thing that's very important in legal medicine is that I did have a job, and my personal opinions and personal welfare are not relevant to the issues of the day-to-day work. And it is the job of a coroner, if you like, or a medical examiner, as we call it here, to determine the cause and manner of death, all death that occur, and especially those that are under the Act. Now, when I came to Canada from one of the Benelux countries, we were once one country actually. We gave independence to Belgium about 150 years ago from the Netherlands. However, I came to Canada and I was an intern in one of the provinces in Newfoundland, and a lady came in with a note and that she was going to commit suicide. She was unconscious, so I examined her and I wrote on the chart, attempted suicide, please admit, right? Well, about half an hour later, the big chief came down and said, who is this idiot who writes down attempted suicide? I said, I did. He said, you cannot do that. I said, why not? He said, that's a crime. I said, you're kidding. What's the penalty? Execution? No. He said, you cannot, now we have to call the cops.
We should say attempted suicide was a crime until 1974.
That's right.
So this is before 1974.
Oh yes, I'm that old.
It's not a crime. It's not a crime now.
Anymore. It was then. I'm talking about the early 60s. Anyway, so I was told, oh, you call it a cry for help. That's all you need to do, right? From now on, this called a cry for help. So so that's the story. Now, then I came here as the chief medical examiner, and it was my job to certify death as regarding to the cause of death and the manner. You say, what does that matter? Well, it does. The manner, there are 5. That's a natural, an accident, a suicide, a homicide, or we cannot determine. It's the natural. Now, in Manitoba, I declared a suicide is the intentional termination of one's life. Okay, now where do I get that from? Do I have the legal right? No, but it doesn't matter, because nobody else defines it, so I define it. It is therefore the termination of one's life, not the taking. You see, there's a difference here. If you take your own life, you have to do it yourself. In my opinion, that's irrelevant. I'm from a Dutch culture, that's irrelevant. Sue Rodriguez was not able to take the pills, but in the coroner's inquest that was called, it says she was able to swallow herself, therefore she did it herself. The fact that the physician put the pills in her mouth was not relevant because she could swallow, and she had a choice, and she chose to swallow. She need not have done that. This is becoming a bit legalistic in a negative sense. So we don't go there. We try to determine if a person is, when they die, whether they die as a result of a suicide or not, an assisted suicide or not. Now, we have very few cases in this province of assisted suicide, but I did come across one where, in my opinion, I ruled it as an assisted suicide. A patient suffering from ALS in one of the hospitals wished to die at a certain time, at a certain place, and surrounded by people of his choice. That is, in my opinion, the intentional termination of one's life. So I classified that death as an assisted suicide. There was a complaint of euthanasia. However, the problem was death with dignity. My concern was not at all whether this person committed suicide, was assisted suicide. It was the death with dignity. It's all part of the public record. The nurses were told, if you speak of this, you will be fired. So the relatives were told, don't talk to anybody. So here is a man who courageously, in my opinion, courageously decided to take his life, to terminate his life. And his family was under a cloud of, there's something not right here, you better shut up about it. That was actually one of the reasons why I called this inquest. The judge ruled it natural causes. Okay. And he said you would have died anyway, just a bit earlier, but you would have died anyway. A judgment, that's the problem of a medical examining system when we have judges making medical decisions. They don't always get it right, in our opinion. They think we don't get it right either, in their opinion. But however, that was the verdict of the day. There are consequences of this classification of an assisted suicide or not. It's a crime, and I'm a medical legal person. There's a physician involved. That means that that person has to decide whether they're going to take part in this or not. Right? And they have the right in this province and elsewhere not to or to do. I am concerned, and I expressed that at the inquest, I'm concerned of the lack of documentation. There's no case. We have no. I go through the charts. We do 8,000 deaths, investigate 8,000 deaths a year in this province. I was here for 20 years. Come on, right? Only one case. What is this, right? Well, it's not documented. So I suggested to the judge there should be regulation to document, and the college picked that up. So there is a requirement of the physician and the caregivers to indeed document. Because without documentation, we will have no data, we have no comparison, we don't know what's going on, and I think that is to our detriment. I like the quote here, and I'm quiet about the defense of necessity. That's a Dutch term, actually. It's translated from force majeure. Napoleon passed through and introduced that concept in Dutch law. I tried it here with a parking ticket, and the Crown heard about it, and he stayed the charges. He said, we don't have the time. Anyway, the defense of necessity is indeed carries a lot of weight in the Netherlands. My experience in the Netherlands are, my best friend died of ALS, euthanization. He died euthanized. He had a wine and cheese party. I'm not kidding. But all his friends were there. And as much as he was able, he shook their hands, he went upstairs, and he died. My mother, my foster mother, was euthanized. She had an agreement, and it was amazing. She could not swallow, she had a stroke, she was 94, and the doctor came in and I said, you know, she's not getting any fluid here, nothing. He said, nothing. He said, no, because we don't keep them alive, right? But what did he do? He woke her up and he said, Mia, do you remember that we had an agreement that if I couldn't help you anymore, right, you would not want me to do or ask me to do anything, I cannot help you. Do you wish to die or do you wish to be treated? Although it may not help, do you want? Have you changed your mind? She says, I have changed my mind. And they drove her in an ambulance to the hospital, to the great chagrin of the university physicians, who says, who brings this dying woman in here, etc., etc. Later that day, she went back home. The nurse was asked to put on increased number of morphine, and she died. And the nurse said to me, I really felt like a hangman, like an executioner. Because that is another aspect of this entire story. Somebody has to do this.
Well, 3 panelists, 3 different perspectives, lots of information, some interesting analysis. And on your behalf, I'd like to thank all of them for their excellent contributions. Thanks also to Rob and Paul for organizing this, and to all of you for coming and for your questions. And remember, we give an extra cookie to each of our panelists for staying within their time limits. And please feel free to come up and grab some tea or coffee. And I'm sure our panelists will hang around for a bit. And if you have other questions or comments you want to make to them, I'm sure they'd be pleased to answer them. So thanks to everybody.